Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luca. Luca, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic. A lot better than I thought. I know you were pretty confident going into today about the particular game we will discuss, but um yeah, that was a fun one. It was a fun Sunday. I will say I was a little tired coming back early this morning from a wedding I was at more in central New York area. But overall, what a Sunday. What a time. Doing great. I mean, how can you not be after what the hell we just had to sit through during the 4 o'clock slate?
Luca, December 30th, 1991. What were you doing on that date?
I wasn't even born, Josh.
So not much, not much. You
Not
weren't you
much.
weren't out partying. Well, that date is important because there was a guy by the name of Thurman Thomas who was awarded the NFL MVP December 30th, 1991. And Luca, that is the last time a Buffalo Bills player has won that prestigious award just 33 short years ago. And I say with full confidence, I felt this way after last week. You made the title of the show of this, but I still felt like it's open for some sort of an egg to be laid in Detroit for me to change my mind. But after today, I say, barring a catastrophe, Josh Allen is going to be the next Buffalo Bills player to win MVP, and it's only going to be in a few short weeks.
Yeah, I'm 1000% there with you. I felt like we were already there, even after last week or even the week before. You know, we kept getting these MVP moments, and then all of a sudden it rolled into last week, which was an MVP like game. And then somehow, some way, Josh Allen actually figured out a way to one up himself 1 week after that. Yes, he didn't do necessarily a historical thing like 3 passing and 3 rushing touchdowns in the same game, but there was a discussion in my living room, Josh, where it quite literally was the disbelief of just how perfect of a game Josh Allen was truly pitching kind of out there. It was the best all around game, it felt like, from Josh Allen, because you didn't really ever have those moments where even in a great game, which you had last week, where he, might short hop a guy 15 yards over the middle or whatever you want to call it, like miss one or two things there to make it from a perfect game. It's like his total QBR, I will be fascinated to know, because I feel like it needs to be a 99.9 after this game. He was spectacular. And as you put perfectly, assuming he's still breathing by the end of this season,
Whew.
he will be he will be the league MVP, because we heard Detroit try to give their guy the love with an MVP chant, but as we discussed before we started recording, it was hilarious and funny in a way where it was like, oh, you really want to see an MVP performance? Here's 17 in all white right now coming out on the field. He'll show you how it's done. And it's truly hard to believe that where we were, Josh, say 15 years ago, as Bills fans, and understanding where the Bills were as a team, to
Mhm.
be like, could you imagine telling, I can't imagine going back to telling, my 18-year-old self, hey, don't worry, hand on shoulder, things will get a hell of a lot better, and you will one day get to watch, a John Elway like guy, a true one of one elite top tier quarterback under center for these Bills, and he will bring an MVP for you and show you just how high end caliber quarterback play goes, and do things that you truly to date cannot believe are possible, even at times. And he does it while making it look easy, simply put.
Yeah, there's a certain aspect of pinch myself I want to do during this era of Bills football, and I think you hit it perfectly. You don't have to go back that far, but if you lived through the majority of the drought, in my situation, I've been a Bills fan, but I'm surrounded by a lot of Colts fans, and it's like we were watching a different sport. I'd be excited that the Bills with JP Lossman went down to Miami and won a game 10-3. It's like, whoa, the Bills won a road game. Holy cow. That never happens in the league. And then on Sunday Night Football, which was just a thing that the Bills were never invited to, Peyton Manning would be doing battle with Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger or Philip Rivers, and they'd go out there and score 40 points apiece. And you just felt like it was just two different sports. And It's even funny. You mentioned you don't have to go back that far. Imagine going back 6 years and saying, "Hey, guys, in on December 15th, 2024, the game of the week is going to be between the Bills and the Lions,
Yeah.
and the world's going to be watching, and people are going to think the Lions are unbeatable, but the Bills have the best quarterback in the sport, and he's going to go in there, put the team on his back, and carry them." Luka, it felt inevitable today. Every time Josh Allen had the ball, it felt inevitable. And the team was making plays around him too. Ty Johnson was several diving catches. The rainbow pass on third down to Dalton Kincaid was a chef's kiss thing of beauty. The one-handed grab by Dawson Knox. Teammates just making plays all over the field. The Bills came into this game with just what I felt like was extra juice. One criticism of last week was it felt like the Rams had an intensity level that the Bills didn't match. This game, from drive one, you could tell the Lions were out there ready for a street fight. And I just thought back to that scene from Tombstone where Doc Holliday just takes the cigarette out of his mouth, flicks it on the ground, and goes, "I'm your Huckleberry." The Bills were ready for the fight today. And they were saying this was the biggest Detroit Lions regular season game in the history of Ford Field. A team showed up today that has played in a large handful of major regular season games. They've been to the second round of the playoffs 5 years in a row. This was not going to be a moment that was too big for them. I thought this was a class win by the Bills. I thought this was a statement moment for Josh Allen's career. And I thought for this team in general, after a season that has had a lot more highs than lows, but a lot of the injury situations, have they beaten good teams, yada, yada, yada. I thought for this point in the NFL calendar, for them to go out there and get this win against this team, put your expectations as high as you want them to be, Luka, and I will tell you they're realistic.
Yeah. I mean, you came on and said something. I won't even say what it
Go
was.
for it. I'll own it.
Yeah. Basically telling me, not only are they making it to that big game, you feel that they're going to be winning it all. I don't find that beyond unrealistic. I how do you watch the game today and essentially, you can raise up all the concerns you want, and it's, the defense can't stop this, questions and concerns with this. I will say this. There are even things about the defense where we were heavily critical about them, justifiably so, last week. And that one particular unit, depending on if we want to or not, actually stepped up this week and did a job that they absolutely needed to do in a key moment that I think it even feeds into what you're saying here, where they heard the criticism, they understood the assignment, and they made sure they stepped up and did the job that they needed to do. And the best thing that happened for the Bills going into this game may have been having that little bit of reset and kind of experiencing that loss, even in such the high of being a game of the year where you just went up against a team led by a great offensive minded coach and a phenomenal, probably Hall of Famer quarterback in his own right in Stafford, who pitched a perfect game and did everything he needed to do right. And you kind of got reality slapped back in your face where it's like, hey, you can't just show up and do what you need to do to win games. Josh Allen might be a freaking human and most likely your MVP this year. But realistically, it's like you still need to do your job if you're the 40th man on the roster, just like Josh Allen's doing his job. So this week, going into that with motivation, understanding you need to actually put in the work to get the result. And it felt like, as you said, that's exactly what they did. They've been in these games. I mean, they just had a game of the year like it was last week. And now all of a sudden you're in that similar vibe, similar situation this week. You've been in big regular season games against the Chiefs, against the Bengals, a lot of other great teams over the years. The Lions are still a little new to this life, and they showed them exactly what's going on when you are in a game like this. It's essentially who blinks first, who's willing to get out of their game plan first, who's willing to kind of throw it all away and just kind of let it fly and do whatever it is you need to do, you think you need to do to force the situation and get it done. Because the Bills perfectly, just an absolute perfect scheme and design. They went in, showed exactly what they were going to do defensively to hopefully bottle up that run. And it essentially caused the first flinch in my eyes, which was watching Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell decide to not necessarily abandon the run, but just to flip their own script and decide to throw it 59 times with Jared Goff because they felt like they needed to win a shootout against that freak of a quarterback 17 across the field, because what they were watching early on that side of things was something truly special even in their eyes. So you got them to flinch, you got them to blink, and you took them. They still are a great team. I mean, you don't put up 494 yards regardless of how it came, unless you're a great team and can do good things. But you got them to get a little bit out of their comfort zone, not able to do everything they probably wanted to do going into the game early on. And essentially, it played into your hand where you were able to just take control of it. And the Bills may have only won by 6 points, but that might be one of the most comfortable 6-point wins I've ever seen. I didn't want to necessarily call it a dominant win, Josh, but it's the closest thing it possibly could be in a 6-point victory.
Yeah, it felt like it was the Bills game all day. Detroit never had the lead. I don't even think they ever tied it up. They got within one possession a couple of times and did end up making it a one possession game as it ended. But it did. It felt like the meeting of not quite garbage time, but not quite the game still in balance. And that's where we kind of lived in the fourth quarter, where the Bills either had a 2 or 3 possession lead. The Lions kept cutting it close, and then they'd go for an onside kick, and Mac Hollins would nearly return it for a touchdown. I've delayed asking you this. We've kind of talked about, all the stuff that went into this game, but when the final gun hits 0 and the Bills improve to, where are we at now with this team? 11-3. What was going through your mind?
Please TJ Watt be healthy? No, I got my own personal reasons for that. Josh Allen is MVP. I mean, it's if it wasn't already done, it was done. I laughed when during the game, maybe it was even afterwards, where you heard individuals say, "Does this do it for you? Is Josh Allen your MVP?" And the thing I love the most is my reaction is even something I'm seeing elsewhere. I love Gruden right now being at Barstool because he has some good content where someone asked him that question. And my answer was his answer right as I heard that during the kneel downs or after the kneel downs. And it was like, what else do I need to see? What else does he need to do? Like, it's such a silly question almost at this point. Like these MVP betting odds, Josh, better shift in the sense of like you saw Travis Hunter late with the Heisman Award, where it's heavy negatives. And if you want to bet it, you need to be willing to pay heavy juice in order to do it, because it feels like it's going to be a loss on kind of the books if they're allowed to, or if they have to still put that bet out for you to take. It's when the kneel downs happened and the handshakes were happening, and as I was saying goodbye to all the friends that were over to the house for football Sunday, it was just it was a beautifully calm, reflective feeling where we have the MVP at quarterback. This team feels to be in the best situation it has been since that 13-second game. And I can't believe what we have down the stretch, where no game in the NFL is comfortable, but you have a nice, comfortable stretch coming up, Josh, where you can just keep it rolling, keep the vibes high, try not to go into the playoffs kind of backpedaling, because I believe that can play a role in it. The 1 seed is still technically alive. We'll see just how alive that is in the next coming, 10 days and 12 days, whatever it works out to be. And it's the future could not be brighter as a Bills fan, as a Josh Allen fan, and just anyone in Buffalo right now. It feels like this might be one of the more special Decembers going into January, and hopefully, fingers crossed, going into February. And all of that, I will say, genuinely kind of was racing through my brain collectively as the kneel down had happened and the clock hit 0.
And when you look at what could really stop this team, I mean, it is football. It's a one game and you're done thing. So, I mean, they could be the 2-7 matchup against the Chargers, and, Vidal or Gus Edwards could come in here and just have a day. And maybe there's a situation where Keon Coleman has a play like he did against Miami, where a touchdown hits him off the chest, bounces up in the air for an interception. Things happen. I get it. But really, it's what Lucas said, the mistake Detroit made. It really feels like it's going to have to be a team that just takes the air out of the football, does what the 1990 Giants and Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells did to the K-Gun Bills, where run the ball, take 40 seconds off the clock, run the ball, dink and dunk, and all of a sudden it's 2 minutes left in the first quarter and Josh Allen has had one drive. And there's 6 minutes left in the second quarter and the Bills have had 2 or 3 drives and one of them's a punt and his arm's getting cold on the sideline. That's what you have to do. Detroit tried to win a track meet today and good luck. I mean, Josh Allen he was way too inevitable today. And I get it. When you're down by 3 scores, you don't have much choice but to score fast and hope your defense can hold serve. I mean, they got so desperate at one point, they kicked an onside kick with 12 minutes to go. That should tell you everything you need to know about Josh Allen. But when you start looking over the landscape of the playoffs, that is why consistently the team that's made me the most nervous is Baltimore. I do think that the Chiefs, obviously, with their skins on the wall, has to make you nervous. And then you start, I mean, after that, Luka, the list is very short in the AFC. Those are the two for me. I respect what the Steelers are doing, but man, at one point today, I'm watching this Steelers team. I'm like, this is a 3-loss team. The game hadn't ended yet. This is a 3-loss team. I'm looking at Russell Wilson dropping back, throwing passes to Calvin Austin and Pat Freiermuth handing off to Najee Harris. And I'm thinking, there is not one player on this offense that scares me. In fairness, George Pickens didn't play today. He scares you. But I just think there's 2 teams in the AFC that give you pause. And if the Bills can somehow find their way to the 1 seed, which, maybe had better odds today, we'll talk about a very massive injury in Kansas City. I think the Bills are going to be somewhat heavy favorites to come out of the AFC. But man, Luka, the way the Bills are rolling right now, I don't really fear anybody. I feel like at worst, they're going to go into a game like they went into today, where it's like, all right, heavyweight fight. Let's see who wins. I don't look at any matchup against any team in this entire sport and think, boy, the Bills are going to need their A game and they're going to need some luck to win this one.
Yeah, I don't believe that's the case for any team. Regardless of where it's happening, who the opponent is, there is no longer a fear label or a scare label. Who am I best wanting to avoid? Now, I don't mean it where it's like, of course there's preference. I would prefer not to have to play Baltimore. It obviously is a bad matchup. It's also a very well-experienced team, one that has confidence against this Bills team. And, there's a lot of things that go against it, but it's not fear. It's truly, to even pull it that way where someone might even object to that. You can bring up the early season Sunday night game against the Ravens as an example of why you should still fear the matchup of Bills versus Ravens. And I just honestly go, what about this team you've been watching, even pre-bye, before the Chiefs game, you go all the way back then, let's say from the Chiefs game on, what about this team in there do you feel is anything like the team we watched play that Sunday night game in Baltimore? Because there's nothing like it. Even Josh Allen himself is a completely different animal than what he was in that game. There's nothing about his game right now that I'm like, yeah, it was still the same way then. Because Josh Allen then still wasn't entirely confident in what he was doing. It felt like, he still had the big playability, but also he wasn't fully understanding of how he wanted to achieve, everything out of the offense. And now it's, how do I put it? Josh Allen's seen the field at a level that is just unheralded. Everyone, I said something in the living room that I'm trying to remember again because I thought it was so well said at the time, but I'm like, I no longer live in a space where I need to be surprised. Now this is actually technically in reference to something that's negative, but I think it still applies here, Josh. So you're gonna have to give me a second. But with Josh Allen's play and this Bills offense in general, there's nothing that's truly going to shock me because everything that's been happening of recent is just true belief in the capabilities of everything going on. And of course, that all starts and kind of ends with 17. It's just nothing is surprising anymore because nothing is impossible for this offense anymore. Josh Allen is at such a high level right now that even if we have to walk into Arrowhead, I am not going to sit there and think, I'm definitely not going to think we don't have a shot, but I'm not even going to think I fear the Chiefs, nor do I think we're going to lose that game. If you have Josh Allen, you better believe you're going to win that game. It's going to take something, perfect to lose that game. It's going to take the Rams' perfection to lose that game. where you can never get a stop on defense, and one or two blips of mistakes happen either with your offense or special teams on top of it that allowed you or caused you to lose the game by a single score. It's a beautiful place that we're in right now. And to me, the only thing that can stop the Bills against anyone is their own decision making and kind of their game management or lack thereof, and just the decisions entirely that, you know, your coaching staff's making or whatever it is, self-inflicted problems more than what the Chiefs would do to us, what the Ravens would do to us, you know, so on and so forth. There is no longer a fear of anyone. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm remotely scared of the Steelers or anything else as well. There's a ranking to it all, but the Bills are at the top of the list. And in my eyes, the biggest enemy to the Bills is the Bills themselves, just when it comes to, you know, maybe detail awareness or focus and the lack thereof, because we even still saw an example of it in this game today where I sat there and I wasn't upset with the game entirely, but I also had the words coming out of my mouth saying, those are the details that lose you playoff games. Those are the moments. And you just have to be focused and making sure you don't screw those up, because that can absolutely decide a game when it matters the most.
And, you know, if we want to kind of bundle this week and last week into one conversation, we talk about the timeout usage at the end of the game. And someone will say, well, you know, what were they really going to be able to do with that if they still score? You know, they still would have had like 30 seconds left and need to get in field goal range, or maybe they need a Hail Mary, or and then today they have a shot for a Hail Mary at halftime and they do a check down instead. We don't know why. Maybe McDermott said it in his post-game presser. I didn't hear that yet. I will try to listen for that and maybe tweet it out if I hear something. And then there was a situation on the goal line that I know you're frustrated about, and you were kind of referencing there, where second down, chance to really kind of put the game away, not put the game away, it's the first half, but go up by 14 points, and 2nd and 1 from the 1-yard line. And instead of doing the quarterback sneak, which the Bills have been basically automatic on, they call a pass play, get a false start, go backwards, and then it's 4th down and Bass misses the field goal. It's just, when you watch the Chiefs, and the thing that makes you frustrated is also a lesson. They've won a game this year on a blocked field goal. They've won a game this year on a field goal that doinks in off the upright. They've won a game this year on a snap that bounces off their quarterback, goes down for a fumble, and they recover. When you don't, they've won a game this year essentially on several low percentage plays. When you don't give yourself a chance to convert the low percentage play, it never can go in your favor. Was Josh Allen going to throw a touchdown on the Hail Mary at the end of the half to Keon Coleman or Mac Hollins? Nobody knows, but he's certainly not going to do it if you don't try. Were the Bills going to come back and beat the Rams had they thrown to the end zone and saved all 3 timeouts and forced the Rams to play legitimate offense and then get the ball back and have a shot at a Hail Mary or getting into field goal range? Nobody knows, but you take the variable out of it when you don't try. The lesson should be to always try, because even a small percentage is a percentage. It's a funny shaped ball. It's a funny sport. And sometimes teams that can feel it slipping away just a little bit, they press. And you could see on the Rams' faces last week, Luka, when the Bills were down there getting ready to score, how nervous they were. And then the relief that came over their faces when the Bills had to burn that timeout. And it's the same feeling that all of us had today when the Lions would cut it to 1 score, or they cut it to 2 scores. And they didn't cut to 1 score until too late. When they cut it to 2 scores, we're thinking, uh-oh, now it's just like get an onside kick or a 3 and out. You never know. And that's the stuff that McDermott still needs to be a little bit more buttoned up on, a little tighter on. I thought he was sharp today with his 4th down go for it. I thought he had the defense ready to play despite being undermanned in the secondary. I give him a lot of credit for today's win. But to Luka's point, playoffs come down to games of inches, games of centimeters, games of millimeters. The Bills lost a playoff game last year because their kicker missed a kick from point blank range. Well, one of the reasons. And you have to be buttoned up on the details, and that's where McDermott still just misses a little bit. I don't want to say he's a C, but he's not an A. I need him to be at least a B+, and I don't think he's there yet. And right now, when you're talking about going into a playoff field with guys like Mike Tomlin, Andy Reid, and John Harbaugh, who all have Super Bowl rings in this league, it's a concern, Luka.
I I think buttoned up is perfect, right? That's exactly what I was kind of getting at, and I think you summarize it perfectly with that. It's one of those things where I get growingly frustrated where you feel like the message out of One Bills Drive all the time from McDermott primarily is, you know, it's all about preaching practice and consistency and accountability and all of these kind of, I'll call them trigger words, right? You just these kind of this message where it's essentially, just do your job, do the little things, all that stuff. It's like, hey, I'd love you to pay attention to those little things and practice the things you preach by practicing proper game management and the thing that you're supposed to do. I mean, there was someone today who I made the reference out loud where I was like, they need to just hire a game management person at this point. And the reply out off the hip was quite literally, isn't that the head coach's job? And it's like, yes. Yes, it is. It is the head coach's job. That is exactly their job. But unfortunately, the one we currently have has too much of a long track record where he doesn't quite grasp that concept. It's not all of it either. It does feel like it's only kind of certain situations, high stressor situations, or kind of on knife's edge, those inch like decisions you need to make. Because I'm with you. I think he's a B minus overall. And that's mainly due to, I think he's really figured out the kind of go for it, punt it / kick the field goal. I think he's gauged that very well now. And that used to be something that we used to criticize him for. And it feels like he is understanding that part of game management. And there's other aspects as well that I do think he achieves or does at a very good level. But again, the point that I really get frustrated with this game, and I mentioned this to you off air, and I just think it needs to be said. It's absolutely something that's going to drive me crazy is you preach once again to pull back about how accountability is there and consistency and practice. And, you want to be a straight shooter and you want to do all these things and you say to do the right thing. Well, we're coming off a week where your explanation for reasoning of why you made the play call decision that led to you using a very costly timeout, which was that tush push in that situation, was because, as you are quoted saying, that is the best play for you in that situation. Those are the words out of your mouth to everyone else's ears as a reasoning to call that play. And if you take that in a bubble, I can understand exactly where you're coming from because it's a high percentage play. You would have the expectation based on how well it works to get that score the first time. So be it. If that's truly the sword you want to die on, I'm all for that. Well, then you found yourself quite literally in a similar situation when it comes to your goal and distance situation where time isn't an issue. And yet you tried to get cute or do something different, even though out of your own mouth, you told us this other thing, which feels like a great idea in this moment of time, is the best play we have for that situation. So what changed between last Sunday and this Sunday? I now need to know that answer because it feels like either you're just overthinking this or you're also not being truthful for how you feel about everything entirely. And you kind of are just off the hip panicking a little bit, which makes me very uncomfortable. So it's the only thing I have that's against that because as the games and stakes get higher, it feels like more questionable decisions will be had by this individual who just has a track record of finding himself making the wrong decision in those moments of time. And that's where I get worried. As I talked about already before, my fear in the playoffs isn't necessarily any other team. It's a decision like that will eventually come back and bite us in the ass as fans and bite the team in the ass for a win. And that to me is truly the biggest threat to this Bills team making the run that it really feels like they deserve to make.
Let's talk about Ed Oliver, Luka. Ed Oliver is a player that I think you and I have been, I would say, probably a little bit lower on than the majority of the fan base was last year when he had his breakout season after getting the contract. But I feel like, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about this, but I certainly felt the brunt of it from what I tweeted out from our Twitter account this week. I think that the pendulum is swinging too far in the other direction on Ed Oliver. Too many times this year, I felt like he just kind of blended in with the rest of the defense, never really looked like a superstar. And I was tweeting some stuff out about Ed Oliver this week, how we need to see more stuff from him. And people were saying just another example of Brandon Beane's busts, a bust picked by Brandon Beane. And, I was going back and forth defending Ed Oliver because as much as I'm like, oh, he's not great, he has flashes of greatness, but I think he's just good. Like that's not a bust. He was the 9th overall pick. He's got a massive second deal. He is a surefire starter on this team, and he has been a 3 technique on a very good defense since he got drafted. Now, were there players picked after him like Jeffrey Simmons and Dexter Lawrence who have gone on to be better players than him in the league? Sure. That's hindsight drafting. Ed Oliver was not a reach. He was every bit worth the 9th pick in the draft. You go back and look at analysts. I did that this week. They all had him as top 10. Ben Solak was the only person I could find in NFL draft Twitter who was like, I'm a little concerned about his size. He's basically a 20th prospect in the league for me. And I give him credit for that. If you thought that, even though I think Ed Oliver has been fine, everybody else, top 5, top 6, top 3, even. I say all of that because it was kind of Ed Oliver's day. I mean, it was Josh Allen's day, but Ed Oliver had 10, this is according to Next Gen Stats, had 10 pressures on 42 pass rushes against the Lions today, the most by a defensive tackle in any game this season. And the majority of them came against the Lions left guard, Graham Glasgow, 7 out of the 10. Ed Oliver was wrecking havoc today. He was a one-man wrecking ball. You could see how it opened up the field for guys like Epinesa and Greg Rousseau to get in the backfield. You saw Smoot get active today. And I just felt like, I know you can't expect Ed Oliver to get 10 pressures every week. You can't expect him to play at his ceiling every week. But that's the tease. When you see a player take over a game like that, not like Jordan Phillips, where when Jordan Phillips takes over the game, it's like 2 splash plays in the course of a game. And it's like, man, I love that guy. This was consistently first play of the game to last play of the game. Ed Oliver was one of the best players on the entire field. When you see that in him, it just tells you how good he can be. And that's what makes you think that there is a better player in there than what has been more of a roller coaster ride for this player. 2-part question, Luka. What did you make of Ed Oliver's day? Where is your confidence level overall on Ed Oliver as it sits today?
Ed Oliver to me is just it's a frustrating player because, as you're saying, these games have been there where it's not just even 1 or 2 splash plays, but it's the consistency through 60 minutes that you're like, that's what we drafted 9th overall. That's what we expected. Why isn't this being untapped week in, week out? And now it feels unrealistic to do it every week, 17 weeks, every season plus playoffs, but a majority of them. And what I'll say is, in today's performance specifically, when I finally realized that, holy shit, we're in one of those days finally, where we used to call Ed Oliver the Thanksgiving specialist because all of his big games, like we're talking about here, would seemingly come in our Bills Thanksgiving games. When I realized it was when he blew up one of the best centers in the league off the snap, Frank Ragnow. When that play happened, I was like, oh shit, we're dealing with a real one today. We're dealing with the very good Ed Oliver today. Because that blew, like I was expecting that during the play, Josh, I didn't know who did it. And then they showed the replay. And I'm like, holy shit, that's 91 doing that. Because as you're mentioning here, I think we've been critical of Ed Oliver this season. I think even last episode, being that I kind of targeted the entire defensive line for kind of laying an egg last week. Ed Oliver is at kind of the focus of that due to who he is. And I was expecting that to be, some other guy, whether it was Jordan Phillips or someone else who just, as you even mentioned, has a splash play or two. And you're like, oh man, that's so nice. The fact that it was Ed Oliver, I knew to buckle up to know he would have a dominant day, and he absolutely did. I mean, Ed Oliver was key for a lot of things, multiple sacks, even though he wasn't necessarily credited for all of them, of course. He was phenomenal today. And that's the kind of player now where I'm not going to be sitting there hoping that he continues that same level of play for next week against New England or the following week against the Jets or, week 18, if he's even playing at New England. But it's like whatever had to happen to get that out of him, that's what you need to figure out how to do that when it comes to the wild card if we're playing it. and then again in the divisional when we're playing in it, and then the AFC Championship if we're playing in it, and then God forbid we get to the Super Bowl, make sure that that gets untapped again there. You need to figure out a way to do that week in, week out. Those 4 weeks, if you get to that point, you need to do that every time. You know, is it we just have to get to games of that magnitude for him to do it every week? Cool. He's already shown us that that necessarily isn't the case. Can he finally do it this go around, though? Can we finally see that Ed Oliver week in, week out when the games matter the most? Today, at least, felt like because it was an elevated game, because it was one that we're coming off of serious criticism, it felt promising where it's like, okay, that guy does still exist, because it feels like up until this point, I even had a little bit of doubt on what the heck was going on. And now it's like, how do we get that now in January when the games matter that much more? Because you need that kind of performance out of him week in, week out at that point in time, because that's ultimately been the part of the, that's been the phase of the game, Josh, that's let the Bills down in those big games that we eventually lost against the Chiefs, against the Bengals, so on and so forth, that you need a guy like Ed Oliver to step up and make plays happen so that Josh Allen can keep doing what he's doing. And then you just need to get a handful of stops, and that game is done and dusted with the way that this offense is playing. You don't need to do it for an entire 60 minutes. I just need you to do it for 5 plays every week. Because if you can do that level of play for 5 plays, not literally, but you know what I'm saying here, make 5 plays happen, I like the chances of the Bills with 17 to win the game.
Ed Oliver's a guy that has been up and down. And for the first couple of years of his career, Spencer Brown is a guy that was up and down. And there's moments when I watch him, Luka, I think he's our best offensive lineman. And that's high praise considering how highly I think of Deion Dawkins. I think Deion Dawkins, save for his one false start penalty every week that now is becoming a tradition, he's playing the best football of his career. He is outstanding at left tackle. But Spencer Brown makes some of those athletic plays out there. And there was a run play today, the one he actually got hurt on, where he gets out there and manages to block even when he's falling down. He is just an absolute weapon in this run scheme. And it really does make you think that this is a Bills team that is built to win in so many ways. We saw it in the bad weather against the Niners, where they're just going to put the ball on the ground and they're going to run it down your throat. And then we saw the last 2 weeks in domes where the weather's perfect. They're like, fine, we're going to drop back and throw it on you. And then James Cook had a monster day today with over 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And a lot of that, I think, does have to do with how good they are at tackle with Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. Spencer Brown was one key player on the Bills that left today with an injury. We don't really know the extent of it. Ryan O'Halloran of the Buffalo News said, landed on right shoulder late in game and was flexing it out. Thigh doctor saying right AC joint when he got shalooped. I don't know what that means, but Matt Milano left with a groin injury, didn't come back. Rasul Douglas didn't seem at all particularly close to playing in this game. So the Bills, these next 3 weeks, they go Patriots, Jets, Patriots, 3 very winnable games before the playoffs start. It's going to be important for them to manage these injuries, get these guys back, hopefully get them ramped up a little bit before the playoffs start, because Luka, one of my biggest concerns about this team, well, every year, is the way that by the time this team's made it to the playoffs, they've had like half of a roster. Remember the year that, they started, well, that was last year. They started AJ Klein at linebacker because Bernard, Milano were out. Daquan Jones had an arm hanging down. Last year or 2 years ago, the Bills were down to Boogie Basham starting at defensive end. They had no healthy edges. And, Terrell Bernard couldn't get on the field. And it was just one of those deals where the Bills were outmanned against the Bengals. That was the year they were all gassed out, the Damar Hamlin year, all that. Today we saw them take the field with 2 backup safeties. Both Hamlin and Rapp were out for this game. And, I think it's important for the Bills to keep winning. We'll talk about some of the long-term ramifications. But more than anything, Luka, at this point, you just don't want to have happen to the Bills what happened to the Chiefs today. Suffer a significant injury in a game that, while is important, it doesn't feel like a whole lot's hanging in the balance, except if you suffer an injury like the Chiefs did, which now has Mahomes very iffy for next week. Friend of the show, Kayla, points out that the Texans are 2-point favorites in Kansas City next week on the opening line. Take that for what it's worth, for what you might think about Mahomes' status. How nervous are you injury-wise going forward with this team?
It's officially survival season, Josh. We are in survival season. What do I mean by that? Just survive every week, please. Because do we realistically think results are in doubt at this point? No. When you have Patriots, Jets at Patriots as your remaining three, you would like to hope that they would be able to go in, handle business, leave, and all it's about is getting and remaining healthy. Just do not have something happen that puts those more important games and the more important time of the season in jeopardy. And Spencer Brown, hopefully he's okay. I'm with you on Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown is just, I never actually, we talked about Ed Oliver trying to be consistent, and that's the thing we want out of him. Spencer Brown was that guy that I was like, I liked him at right tackle, but I also accepted this at a certain point in his career. I was like, he probably won't be consistent, but that's okay because his high end is still great. I'll live with his lows. I'll live with whatever else is coming with it. It's the baggage I'm willing to accept. Well, last season and this season, all of a sudden it's like there is no baggage. Like the baggage is the typical thing that happens when you play a very physical position, and it's, hey, every once in a while you're going to get banged up. You're going to get an injury. That's the nature of football. That's the nature of being an offensive lineman. And, fingers crossed when it came out that it was I believe they came out and said it was a head injury. Honestly, I was almost relieved a little bit because, they were kind of checking his neck, and you're not sure if they're maybe even checking his shoulder or whatever else it could potentially be. That feels more significant. If we're talking just a head injury, most likely, of course, that's discussing a concussion. Hopefully things are okay with that. But for the entire roster, it's really just simply about survival. Get through each week as healthy as possible. We saw all the injuries to linebackers happen today. Hopefully nothing serious once again. It's all of that stuff where you just need to make sure everyone makes it so you don't have your AJ Kleins playing in the playoffs as the games matter the most, and you can truly capitalize on the opportunity that clearly feels like it's present right now after this Detroit win, where we're talking about, or Josh is already eyeing up tickets to New Orleans to hopefully watch a Bills Super Bowl. So fingers crossed. Just get through. Survival is all it's about at this point in time.
One guy we got to mention before we get to game balls and game checks. Holy cow, Luka, Ty Johnson. You know who he reminds me of, and this is going to be high praise, but remember those Tom Brady Patriots teams? He was never the best player on the offense, but James White. Every time he got his number called, dude made a play. I feel like Ty Johnson is not our James White. I mean, that's high praise. But I feel like he's in the James White role. James White was never the number one back. It was always Corey Dillon, Lawrence Maroney, Stephen Ridley, maybe even late. I don't know if he crossed over with, I know he crossed over with Damian Harris. I don't know if he crossed over with Stevenson, but Sony Michel, LeGarrette Blount, but he was always that guy that when it was got to have it, they could throw the ball to him. Or third down, Tom Brady trusted him. How many times do you see Tom Brady that annoying, like pretend the ball got snapped over his head, but White catches the snap and runs it up the middle? Just super reliable, hands like a wide receiver. And that's what I see when I see Ty Johnson. Just a guy that I can't remember the last mistake this guy made. You put him back at kick returner, you feel great about it. You put him back at punt returner, you feel great about it. You throw the ball to him on a linebacker, you feel like it's a mismatch. You hand the ball out to him out of the backfield, you don't think twice about it. Never going to be the starting running back on this team, but if James Cook had to miss time, you'd feel like you're in really good shape with Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. For a guy that was picked up off the street by Brandon Beane 2 years ago to now have carved out such a useful role for these Bills, and then today when his number was called, he made it happen, Luka. Several key grabs. I thought really, I mean, you always want to be the team that scores first in a game anyway. That third down diving catch where Josh Allen hits him over the middle. Final game line for Ty Johnson today. 5 receptions for 114 yards, added 2 carries for 9 yards. Just a nice little Swiss Army knife for this offense and just another weapon for Josh Allen to use.
It was a Ty Johnson revenge game, Josh. Did you not recognize that? Drafted by the Detroit Lions himself.
I never knew he played for the Lions.
Yeah, no, if you weren't aware, 2019 6th round pick by your Detroit Lions. No,
I must have been peeing during that pick.
Yeah. tongue in cheek if anyone hasn't picked that up. But it's Ty Johnson is one of those things where he might be one of the better $1.2 million ever spent for this Bills team. He is the Swiss Army knife. I don't know if I'd go as far as James White role. I think James White caught a Super Bowl winning touchdown in overtime at one point in his career.
Give it time, Luka. Give it time.
Let's see if that will happen for Ty Johnson. But when every key play seemingly kept going to him early on, and next thing you know, all of a sudden, Ty Johnson was the leading receiver at the time for the Bills with, I think at that point in time, he had 90 receiving yards. It was like, oh shit. It really does feel like all of these things keep going to him. He finishes the game as the leading receiver. And we talked about, I think last week, where Khalil Shakir is the safety blanket, of course, for Josh Allen. And he's also as explosive as can be when it comes to that role. So he's almost like a Cole Beasley plus. But there's something in a safety blanket as well for Josh Allen with Ty Johnson now, where he can truly be that guy in passing downs to be pass pro, as well as a receiver, as well as a reliable option out of the backfield to run the ball. He can do everything you ask him to do, and Josh Allen trusts him. I think he is just another example about what this team is this year as well, when it comes to simply put how do I say this? You hear Chris Sims talk about all the time how there's finally pieces all around Josh Allen. That's what we're seeing now. That's why it's all working so well. I don't go as far as it like feels like they've upgraded everything and now all of a sudden there's pieces here. But what I think they upgraded was all of these reliable, dependable pieces around Josh Allen where Josh Allen is comfortable with them. And I don't mean that in any sort of slight to Diggs, because you don't throw the ball 148 times to a guy if you don't trust him. And then you don't throw 4 touchdowns in one of the biggest playoff games of your career if you don't trust a Gabe Davis. But it felt like at that era, you only had 1 or 2 guys. Your Cole Beasley wasn't really there anymore, and you weren't really sure where to go. So you kind of forced some things. And now truly you have your Khalil Shakirs, your Ty Johnsons, your Dalton Kincaids, your Dawson Knox. All of these guys are being used in all different moments all the time. And it's because Josh Allen trusts all of them. So when Chris Sims is out there saying that they finally gave him a supporting cast, I don't think it's necessarily a skill kind of thing that Chris Sims is playing or saying. I personally take that as there's finally now a plethora of options and pieces around Josh Allen that Allen trusts. And Allen's willing to do what he needs to do with the offense, that he can go every which way with it. And Ty Johnson just had a game today that shows clear as day how much he trusts him in key moments with certain plays. And he's willing to throw it downfield to him because he knows there's a good chance that Ty Johnson's going to come down with it. It doesn't just need to be, your Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakirs. It can be other guys. Speaking of Keon Coleman, to have the audacity for Josh Allen as he's scrambling out to, even though Keon's already 40 yards down the field, to go, hey, just keep going down and then throw one of the quickest 50-yard balls you'll ever see. It's a thing of beauty. But not to get sidetracked here, Ty Johnson it's funny how a third string running back could be yet one of your key pieces in an offense because of just how much trust your starting quarterback has in that individual with certain situations and key situations that he will make the play needed for him.
I thought Keon Coleman was going to score on that play. He is such a strong human, and he had no business scoring. No. But with him and then Mac Hollins there to kind of help him along, I was like, man, he might actually score on this play. That was a beautiful play to see. Luka, let's do game balls and game checks. I want to take a look around the conference, talk about the Mahomes injury, talk about what we think we know about where if the Bills finish with the 2 seed, what that could mean for their playoff opponent. I think we can start to really narrow that down now. But let's do game balls first. Who gets your game ball? This is the second week in a row, Luke. I forget to have the box score up. For the Bills, 48. This is like video game numbers. 48-42 victory over the Detroit Lions today.
This individual in 2 weeks, Josh, has put up almost 100 fantasy points. Just want you to let that sink in. He had 57, I believe, last week. He had another 44-ish this week.
I knew you were going to take Dawson
something
Knox.
Like that. Yeah. the guy just locked up MVP. He went 1-1 in this stretch, and he locked up MVP. It is his. He's bringing it to Buffalo, as you mentioned early on in the episode, for the first time since 1991, before I was even something of an idea. Well, at that point, I probably was an idea. But regardless, not to get too personal, Josh Allen is who's getting my game ball. He was special, and I mentioned it. This might have been his best overall game entirely. I said it in my living room where the 13-second game is probably the best quarter. The fourth quarter was the best Josh Allen quarter we've ever seen. Last week was a special game, but I would say this week might have been his best game. There was absolutely no moment that I can look back and be like, Allen missed that throw, could have done better, whatever it is. This was like pitching a perfect game. I feel like Allen did everything as best as he could. And even though it wasn't his best statistical game, this is his best 60-minute game that I can recall. And it's funny to me, Josh, how in the same season, that Ravens game I mentioned even earlier in this episode may have been, in my opinion, his worst ever start as a professional for the Bills. And now we're in a season where he quite literally provided us the best start of his career, and he is going to be your MVP. So, yeah, Josh Allen, you are my game ball recipient once again.
And we do not cross over. He would have obviously won mine too. I agree with everything you said. I echo it. There's two guys here that stand out to me. The guy who's not going to get it is the guy we just talked about, Ty Johnson. What a performance by him today. Really helped set the tone early with some big catches. Was a big weapon for the Bills in beating man coverage. Really helped the Bills dissect the Lions defense early on. He's not going to get it. A couple other shout outs that I don't think are on that level, but I thought Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins both played very, very well today. And then I want to, this one's kind of tongue in cheek, but I think I mean it. Amari Cooper, 0 catches today. And that's notable to me because not once did we see a sideline shot of Amari Cooper throwing a fit. This is a guy, been a Pro Bowler in this league, been a guy that at times in his career was thought of as a top 10 receiver in this league. When the Bills traded for him, it was, the Bills finally got a number 1 receiver in this league. This is a guy that's going to get paid this offseason, and the stats he puts up will go a long way to getting him paid. We've seen bigger fits out of less reasons out of receivers. Look no further than the Eagles last week with AJ Brown. They win a game and he's upset. Didn't hear a word out of Amari Cooper today. And, there's a certain segment of Bills fans, I'll put myself in that. That's nice. It's nice to just let the offense flow. The Bills have a special thing going right now. If the Bills were a 5-6 football team or, a middle of the pack football team and, Amari Cooper wasn't catching passes, yeah, get upset. But you know what? It's nice that drama's not there. By the way, Stefan Diggs said that Josh Allen will get his vote for MVP. Just throwing that out there on Twitter. He said 17's ball, and that was pretty cool to see. My game ball goes to Ed Oliver. 10 pressures in the game, took over on defense on a day where the Bills were playing without their 2 starting safeties, without Rasul Douglas. And then they even lost Cole Bishop as the game went on, who I thought actually had some pretty good moments today. You could see his athleticism flash, although still some indecisiveness in coverage. Ed Oliver and the defensive line needed to dominate, and Ed Oliver certainly was up to the task. Just a mammoth today, bullying Frank Ragnow, bullying the other guards on the Lions too. Ed Oliver gets my game ball. All right, Luka, with the good, there's got to be some bad. Who gets your game check for the Bills' victory today?
Best part is one of your honorable mentions for your game ball was probably going to be my tongue-in-cheek game check recipient.
Yeah.
I mean, out of the list you gave, of course, it would be Amari Cooper. But it would have been the most positive game check. But I think your points actually highlighted it so well. You may, for the first time ever, have talked me out of my game check, which feels like it shouldn't ever happen because normally someone you would put in regards as a game ball shouldn't be an individual that you then are sitting here and want to award with a game check, the Zach Moss Memorial Award that we retired. I honestly, to me, it's really tough because even though we allowed 42 points, I feel like it was a better day for the defense, especially considering what we saw last week. And realistically, I think a lot of individuals. I mean, you gave your game ball to Ed Oliver. There were a lot of guys who gave strong performances. It can't be realistically anyone. David Edwards is the only one that comes to mind on the offensive side of the ball that maybe you could do that, but realistically, I can't really fault him for too much. He had a couple key penalties overall that I was just like, what the hell? Including chalking off a touchdown that was fun. But I'm not going to also give him the award for that kind of stuff. It is what it is. My game check award is going to go to Balin Spector. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because the only time when he was out there, I kept just wondering where the hell is, what's the situation with Milano? What's the situation with Dorian Williams? And I'm just like, now I got to watch this guy playing weak side linebacker. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't good. And he looked bad. I'm just going to say it, like, he looked bad. Mm-hmm. So it's a little mean to do that for Balin Spector, but he came in relief and he did not provide us with any relief as he was in. And I was very happy to see Dorian Williams was back on the field before game's end so that we don't have to necessarily experience that anymore and further. So sorry, Balin Spector, but you are getting my game check award this week.
Yeah, it was rough. When Milano was out and Williams was out, they just did whatever they wanted to over the middle of the field. And, it was his first game back from IR, and he has looked better this year at times. I do think there's a massive drop-off after Dorian Williams to Balin Spector. Speaking of first game off of IR, Dwayne Smoot was back today, and we talked about off the air. It's just, he is such a dirty work player. He really does make everybody's job easier on that defensive line. It was nice to see him back in there. My game check is going to go to a guy that's received it several times this year, Tyler Bass. Look, dude, it's just hasn't been your year, hasn't been your span of years. You had the big kick against Miami. I love that. But in the grand scheme of things, you're missing too many kickers that make as much as you should. And today it was basically an old school NFL extra point that he missed. And Tyler Bass, there was a real opportunity there for the Lions to seize momentum after what I thought was nearly a perfect first half by the Bills. And you just can't have that. We talk about McDermott not being buttoned up on the inches, the game of inches. These are tangible points that Tyler Bass can cost his team. You need him to make the layups. You can understand if McDermott like sends him out there for a 55-yarder and he misses it. You could put that on McDermott. It's funny because he hit the one that was like 50 yards today, and then he missed the one that was point blank. But Tyler Bass has to make the layups. The Bills can't afford to not get points when the points are there to be made. And, it's hard to imagine a scenario, Luka, barring a just fantastic playoff run where he walks off a couple of playoff games, maybe has a couple kicks in the Super Bowl, where Tyler Bass is the Bills kicker next year. There's just been too many downs for a guy that's making in the top percentage of the league in kickers. There was a big injury in the league today. Patrick Mahomes, well, there's several big injuries. Nick Chubb broke his foot. That's brutal. But, as far as affecting playoff implications, Patrick Mahomes has what they're calling a high ankle sprain. And Ian Rappaport says he is week to week. And what's interesting about that is the Chiefs play on Saturday, and then they turn around and play the following Wednesday on Christmas. So real tough stretch for Mahomes when even the most mild of high ankle sprains generally are 1 to 2 week injuries. And the Chiefs have to play the Texans at Arrowhead, and then they go to Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. So Luka, it felt like maybe the Bills cost themselves a chance at the 1 seed last week when they lost to the Rams, although you were very quick to point out you had them going 1-1 in this stretch, and they just needed to swap the two, and they took care of that today. This Mahomes injury does, I think, open the door for that conversation. You're going to need the Chiefs to lose next week to Houston for that conversation to stay relevant, I think. But what do you think are the odds that Mahomes misses next week? Houston's already favored, so at least the betting odds say he's going to miss. And how realistic do you think it is that now the Chiefs could drop a couple?
I have felt that this stretch that the Chiefs are going to be in, we're talking about, they have the Texans at home on a Saturday. They then have to have a quick turnaround to go to Pittsburgh and play a Steelers team that hopefully, as we're talking about big injuries, TJ Watt is healthy. Once again, I say this a little bit selfishly, but overall for this as well, I say that. And then that week 18 game against Denver, that could be an interesting game where Denver could kind of control its own destiny rather than the Chiefs potentially, where the Broncos could essentially beat the Chiefs in a world. Let's say the Chiefs lose one of these next two games, and then it comes down to that, assuming the Bills win out. And the Lions could be in a situation where either they have to entertain the idea of going to Orchard Park to play the Bills, or if they win that game, they then just basically have yet another game going to Arrowhead to play the Chiefs. And I can see a scenario where the Broncos would much prefer their chances going to Arrowhead and playing the Chiefs rather than playing the Bills in Buffalo. So I think I'm not going to sit here and say it's realistic, but I think it's possible. I think if Mahomes' injury is especially one where they have to truly weigh their options on, is 1 week of rest to give him a little bit of extra rest to go into that Christmas game and hopefully be healthy to play a Steelers game where if they can get through the Texans game okay with Carson Wentz and then hopefully go into Pittsburgh with a chance to essentially not essentially, they would lock up the 1 seed in that point. Then they would be able to buy themselves that week 18 rest week, more so that then Mahomes could have 2 weeks off to really get ready for the playoffs. That, to me, if I were someone that even remotely gave a shit about the Chiefs, would be a way that I would handle it, because that feels like the best path to take care of business. You have the Texans coming to your house. You should, if you're Andy Reid, feel confident enough with a Carson Wentz that you can get the job done with everything you do. And then from there, make sure you have Mahomes ready for that one game that if you can lock that one up, you're good to go. And you just bought Mahomes 2 more weeks of rest going into the divisional round. That is everything. Instead, if you try to rush him back, you risk, of course, the known risks that something gets worse. You're putting things in jeopardy. Maybe Mahomes isn't able to make the plays that you usually can, and that sometimes can set a team back. Excuse me, whatever it is. And ultimately, the issue compounds itself. So, sorry, a little bit of a dry throat here. Overall, I think the injury really just kind of, it's one of those like perk your ears things. You're just like, oh, there is life. There is a chance. And if you're a Bills fan, you're going to be watching that Saturday game at noon, I think it is, or 1. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be all eyes on Christmas, watching Netflix, hoping they don't have a buffer issue. And you can actually watch that Steelers game. And for any Steelers fans out there, if we have a situation where the Steelers somehow do not win that Texans game, and all of a sudden that Steelers game could quite literally be the deciding force on who gets the 1 seed, go Steelers. Mm-hmm. Everyone in Buffalo is going to be a Steelers fan that day. Christmas is going to be yellow, black, and gold. I might even break out. I do own something, Josh. I might even break out a Troy Polamalu jersey for that day. And I will go all in on the situation. Love Troy Polamalu. He was just so much fun to watch. I had to buy a jersey. I'm a jersey whore, so I got a bunch of random ones.
There you go.
But it would be it'd be an exciting Christmas for all Bills fans if we could find ourselves in that reality.
And then I agree. I still think, next week is key. If it doesn't happen next week, I do think that it becomes a bridge too far, because then you need the Chiefs to lose their last 2. But next week is huge. And then you have 2 losable games for the Chiefs after that. You only need them to drop 1 as long as the Bills do what they're supposed to. If the Bills were to hold on and be the 2 seed, which became more likely today than falling down below that with the Steelers loss to Philadelphia, I think we've gained some clarity on who their opponent would be round 1 in the playoffs. It will not be Baltimore, in my opinion. Baltimore already has a win over the Chargers. The Chargers lost today, so Baltimore would have to drop 2 to fall below the Chargers in the standings, and the Chargers would have to win out. I don't think that's going to happen. So to me, it really comes down to the Chargers or the Broncos, and they play next week. And if the Chargers beat them, then the Chargers will have swept the Broncos. The Broncos would fall to the 7th seed. Honestly, Luka, I put the Chargers and the Broncos in about the same category of teams. Good, not great. A team that the Bills should beat. And holy cow, if the Bills season ends because they lose a home game to the Chargers or the Broncos, then this season was never as special as we thought anyway. As a 2 seed, that's about, I don't want to say as soft as a landing spot because we've seen Mason Rudolph come in. We've seen Skylar Thompson come in. But I think that's about, when you look at what the AFC looked like before the season started, thinking about what Cleveland could have been, thinking about what Cincinnati could have been, thinking about, like, you were really high on the Colts, thinking about what the Jets and Dolphins were supposed to be sitting here thinking we could be seeing Bo Nix come to Orchard Park, who I've seen have some good moments. Sign me up, and we'll see what happens. Any final thoughts, Luka? Anything league wide? Anything Bills wise? Anything you want to get into before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered it all. I think playoff clarity is just becoming a beautiful thing because, Josh, the fact that playoffs are becoming clear just means one thing: playoffs are coming, and that is, it's obviously love and hate because it's like you love playoff football more than almost anything else, but then at the same time, that means football's coming to an end,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those things that it feels like yesterday when I was going to Highmark to watch Bills Cardinals week 1 and having a grand old time then in the sun, but I definitely think this game, this moment, this season, what it's become, and kind of what we believe it will be when weekend 18 ends is I think we're in that, like I mentioned, that it's survival time for the Bills, but now it really can be for a fan kind of one of those more like reflective periods, right? Like you don't want to take your foot off the gas,
Yeah.
but this is the time to start to enjoy. When they tell you to look around the room and bask it in, like enjoy it. It's like we are truly experiencing what feels like a special season. And most, if not all individuals didn't see this one coming. I only say most because Josh, believe it or not, myself even saw this coming, not even this good coming, but overall, based on our season preview, if anyone wants to listen back, I believe yourself was a little bit more negative than mine. I believe that we would have been sitting in a pretty good situation by this week. But did I think going into Detroit and winning was even possible? No. Did I think we would be sitting here and going, as long as Josh Allen's still breathing, he's your league MVP? No, I didn't see that one coming. And it's been a special ride. It's been a special season. We don't need it to be ending here, but it's time to start enjoying it for what it is at this moment in time and just buckling up and getting ready for whenever that playoff game comes, whether it's the wild card, whether it's fingers crossed, the divisional round. Um, we are in a truly special time as Bills fans to enjoy a very, very special team thanks to number 17.
Yeah, it's pretty special. It's pretty awesome, and man, oh man, I hope it ends the way we all want it to. Either way, Luka and I will be here for the finale of it. Hopefully, it's several weeks from now, several months from now. But either way, Luka and I'll be back next week to discuss Bills Patriots. They are in Orchard Park next
Yeah,
week, yeah, because they finish up on the road.
right.
And there is a scenario also we talked about off the air where if the Chiefs win their next 2 games and the Bills win their next 2 games, the Bills won't have anything to play for week 18. They could rest their players. So that would be somewhat helpful, but obviously that would mean they didn't get the 1 seed. All right. Well, for Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will see you next week on all things Bills Patriots on Bills Chat.